My name is Maeve Delargy and I'm the chairperson of the Irish Women Lawyers Association. And tonight, as hopefully you know and you haven't forgotten what you signed up for this evening, we are joined by Katie De Gama, who's going to speak to us on the topic, which seems to have a real resonance with people. We've had a great uptake in registrations. The topic is finding purpose in your career, and that makes sense that for all of us it's something we're looking for, lawyers or non-lawyers, or starting out in a career or mid-career. So it's a good topic that is of interest and of benefit, I think, to all of us to think about. Katie has 20 years experience as a legal professional, both a barrister and solicitor, and was the managing partner of the Dublin office for DIC Beechcroft. And having lived and worked as a lawyer and business leader in Ireland for 16 years, she's developed a broad knowledge of the legal environment and brings this understanding and expertise to all her leadership development work. She is now an executive coach and leadership development consultant. So without further ado, I will hand over to Katie. And as mentioned, if you saw in our social media posts, we do have a little something for one lucky attendee this evening. So we'll sort that out at the end. So do please stick around and we'll get to that. But for now, I'll hand over to Katie, and yeah, let's enjoy.
Great. Thanks, Maeve. And thank you to the IWLA for this opportunity to speak about something which is, I think it's interesting. I think it's something that has come to the fore quite a lot in the last year, and was certainly around before then, but seems to be popping into people's thinking much more so over the last year than it perhaps had been before. And it's a topic that is very close to my heart, and one that's, I think, really resonated with me and the work that I do with clients over the last couple of months, particularly as people sort of plan their futures really, and what they might want to do into the coming months and the coming years ahead in their careers. So really something that resonates with me, and I hope that it does with you too. And it's lovely to see, I can't see faces, but it's lovely to hear that people are joining tonight. So thank you everyone for giving up your Thursday evening. I'm sure there's sun here, so I'm sure there's something else you could be doing. So I appreciate you joining me this evening. Thank you very much for that. It would be lovely to start with a bit of participation. And I wonder if people in the audience, probably many of you have used Mentimeter before. If you haven't, it's just a way of getting some initial thoughts about what you come up with in your own mind when you think about purpose. So if I could ask you to go to menti.com, I don't know if some of you have your phone with you or just any device you could use. So menti.com, menti.com, and use this code which is in the chat, which is 74720797. 74720797. And if you could just let me know what word or words, if you have a couple of them, great, come to mind about purpose. What does it mean for you? And I'm going to screen share in a moment when the words start coming through, and we'll just see what comes up. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to do that, which would be great. And thank you. They're already coming in. It's always a bit of a concern right at the beginning where you think, is anyone out there? So it's lovely. Thank you for bringing the words through. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And hopefully you'll start seeing this. So we've got meaning, we've got something to work towards, fulfillment, confidence, goal. These are brilliant. Thank you. Drive, happiness, lovely, fulfilled, needed, really lovely words, worthwhile, satisfaction, values, a clear path, engaging, grounding. These are great. And clearly from that, the two or three that are coming up most often are meaning, fulfillment, happiness, and drive. So they're good words. Good to see. So a bit of everything, actually. I'm just going to stop sharing that. Thank you for doing that. It gives me a good sense of what's in the room and what we think about when we start thinking about purpose. And it's really interesting, because I think purpose over the last couple of years has really changed. And I think it's become something that we are expected to have. And I'm not sure that was true 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think there were certain people who have a sense of what they want to do in life and all of the goals that they want to fulfill, from very early on. And that's fantastic. And people like that tend to have a really clear focus. But certainly that wasn't true for me, and certainly some of the clients that I work for and work either. So it's good to know what else we might want to focus on if we don't have that single thing that might drive us all forward into our careers. And I wanted to just be really upfront with people right at the beginning, and share with you that at the beginning of my career, and probably until really recently, I don't think I thought about purpose in terms of my career. I think I was too busy surviving, too busy getting through the early stages of my career, too busy trying to progress, too busy just trying to get on with the work that I needed to do in order to get to the next stage. I'm not sure, I'm reflecting back, I'm not sure that I ever had a really clear idea of what that end goal was, other than just to keep moving forward and to not, to not lose my job, probably was one of the things I was thinking. And when I was preparing for this session this evening, I decided I might just look up what the word purpose meant, because actually I'm not sure I ever really thought about it. And I came up with a couple of actually just terrified me, because I looked at it and it said, purpose is an abiding intention to achieve a long-term goal that is both personally meaningful and makes a positive mark on the world. And I don't know what that conjures up in your mind, but I had to read it a couple of times and think, gosh, there's a lot in that. Actually, there's that seems like an awfully big, overwhelming, quite challenging, really difficult thing to do. But that is what it says it is. And also, if you look at the word purpose and its roots, it is to be, or an intention to be or to do something. So that sort of brought it a little bit closer to home for me. So I felt slightly better about what I'm going to talk to you tonight. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and give you the slides. They are minimal slides, in the sense that I prefer to just have small amounts of data up. But I'm very happy if there's anything that anybody else needs me to talk about. I'm very happy to have any questions. And I think Maeve, I think the chat might be open, so I don't know if Maeve might collate any questions that come in and might just let me know, because I don't have them open on my screen at the moment. So please feel free to ask any questions, and there'll be time at the end as well, I'm sure, to have a look at those. So finding purpose in your career. And we've had a really good sense of what it means for you. And what's clear is that it can mean different things for different people. And I think that's an important place to start, that it is a personal project for you. And it's something that you may have thought about a lot already, or it may be something that you're beginning to think about, or something that you've never thought about before, and that this is just a new idea for you, or a new type of thinking for you. And I was watching recently, I'm a fan, I think, of Simon Sinek's work, and I don't know whether a lot of you have seen his TED Talks on starting with why. And I rewatched it recently, actually, just to see what it did in terms of my thinking on purpose. And I found it really challenging for personal purpose. I think what he talks about in terms of companies and organizations, and he gives the example of Apple, talking about what is their purpose, and their purpose is to challenge the status quo and to make technology that that isn't the norm, or isn't what is expected. And I get that. I was really bought into that in terms of organizational purpose and that real need for organizations to differentiate themselves by why they do something rather than what they do or how they do it. So I am drawn to that. I do accept that, and I'm really comforted that that is what organizations are beginning to do. But for me, I could never translate that into what my purpose was. It seemed like it was for tech companies or for innovative businesses or for people inventing new products. It didn't feel like it was something that was meant for me. So I started thinking about what is another perspective, and how else could we think about purpose? And what I'd like to share with you over the next 30 minutes or so is perhaps a different way of looking at it, and hopefully a way that will resonate with some or with many of you, and to provide I suppose, a roadmap, or at least a starting place for a roadmap on how you might go about thinking of your purpose. And if you've already started the journey, just maybe give you some additional insights or some ideas about how to build on it, how to evolve that thinking for you, or maybe come at it with a completely different, a fresh perspective. So I just want to start with one of these quotes that I really enjoy and I keep coming back to, and it's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote about the reaching out without fear. And again, when I think about purpose, it does seem to be a scary word. It does seem to be overwhelming. It seems to be an unattainable or a large thing in the future that doesn't necessarily sit with me now. And I like the fact that Eleanor Roosevelt in this quote is talking about reaching out and experiencing without fear those newer and richer experiences. And I think that's what underpins the work that I really resonate with, and that seems to resonate with the clients that I work with. So the roadmap, I've broken it down into 3 areas. And I'm quite sure, and I'll be very happy to tell you that there are probably lots of other ways to do it. And there may be lots of different stages within each of these 3 topics, but it's a way for me, certainly, to just begin that journey and to start thinking about it perhaps in a clearer way than we might have done before. So I'm going to take you through this roadmap and just introduce you to the concepts that I like to use, certainly for myself when I'm examining my own or exploring my own sense of purpose, and particularly in a work context, what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, how I'm showing up. And it's also something that I quite often use with clients, clients who don't necessarily come with a sense of needing to understand what their purpose is, but that it can help shape their decisions, it can help shape their thinking, and it might just bring them that little bit closer to figuring out what it is that they really want to do in the next phase of their life. So the 3 steps, if I can call them steps, are the starting point. So where do I start from? And I'll bring you through some questions that I like to ask both myself and lots of people that I'm working with. And then we get to break it down even further. So you can ask yourself the questions. It's a great starting point. Most people find it very useful, but then we need to get under the skin a little bit more. So we break it down into even clearer perspectives that you can use right now. And then the third part is, that getting really granular. And for the lawyers on this call, hopefully that's the part where it starts to make perhaps some bringing together and a little bit of sense, because we really dive deeply into the actions, the steps, the habits, all of those seemingly small steps, seemingly incremental gains that lead to the goal or the outcome or the purpose that you're seeking to achieve. And one of the perspectives that I like to think about is, and what I've said on the slide there, which is taking it from the singular to the multiple. Again, I was saying at the beginning that I think there are some people, and I really admire people that are really clear very early on in their career or even in childhood that they have a singular goal. And it brings to mind a friend I went to university with who was absolutely clear from probably age 10 or 12 that she wanted to go to the Olympics, and nothing would stop her in that. It was an absolutely singular purpose to everything she did. And happily, she did get there, and she achieved that goal. But people like that are probably few and far between. Most of us, I would hazard a guess, are in that general sense of what we'd like to do in life, or general sense of where we might start our careers, or an idea of what life means to us and what makes sense for us, but not necessarily that singular, laser focused sense of what we want to achieve. So the perspective to start with that I like to bring is that's absolutely fine. That's a great place to start. I was studying recently, and I had the great pleasure to start studying with two great teachers who introduced some philosophical concepts from Nietzsche. And Nietzsche, and I'm no way an expert on Nietzsche, so if there are philosophers on the call, please forgive me if I sort of paraphrase. But what I picked up from Nietzsche's approach in the space of purpose is that he didn't believe there was any point in basing your entire life on one single goal or one single purpose. And that this idea of one true meaning for your life just didn't seem to make sense in the world, because things shift. Situations change, we evolve as people, the people around us evolve and change and come in and out of our lives. So he suggested that we replace this idea of needing a singular purpose with wonder. So going through life with a sense of wonder about where this might lead us, or how we might move from one part of our life to another part of our life. And even more resonant with me was his idea of life as a series of short stories, rather than life as a standalone novel that has to have a very clear beginning, a very clear middle, and a very clear ending. He introduced the concept, or rather didn't introduce it, but popularized the concept that we could have lots of different chapters. We could have lots of different short stories, and they might not necessarily to the outside world look as if they fit together in any particularly neat or purposeful way, but that was a good way to live our lives, just as much as the person who has that singular goal and the singular purpose. So for me, I love to think of the lives that we're living and the careers that we're having as not a standalone novel, unless that's something that resonates with you, but it can be a series of chapters or a series of short stories. So let's get into it. And yeah, the Socrates quote that I also enjoy as well: wonder is the beginning of wisdom. So the place to start, and asking the questions that might just help you gain the clarity or additional clarity about what it is that you want to achieve. And I'm going to start with the 4 questions. And the 4 questions are these. First one is, what do you really want to achieve in life? First question. Second question, what values are most important to you at the moment? What calls to you at the moment? And that's an important phrase, which I'll come back to in a minute. Number 3, what would make me happy or unhappy? And number 4, what principles guide me? And these principles are different to values, because principles, unlike values, are timeless. So our values may shift over time, they may evolve because of our circumstances, but our principles are the ones that guide us. And I just wanted to share with you, because I've done some work myself on just refreshing my sense of purpose in the last 6 months. And I started with these questions. And one of the ones that I was just questioning whether or not I was completely comfortable with what they were was my values. So I took I suppose a values test, if you like, or a values questionnaire, and there are many of those are on the internet, and many people you might work with have values questionnaires or values questions that you can ask yourself. And I just wanted to share with you what came out of mine, because it interested me, and it may well resonate with some of you. So I did a values construct, as it's called, which asked you to rate 19 different values. And once you'd rated them in order of 1 to 19, you then took your top 3 and really looked closer at those top 3. So just to share the top 3 with you, because I just want to sort of show you how you might go through this journey yourself. So the first one for me, so top value for me was personal growth. And the information behind personal growth is to continue to grow in my self-awareness, continue to do challenging work that utilizes my talents, and to continue to evolve as a human being. So that for me is number 1. Number 2 is family, which is to spend time with family members and create cherished memories. And then for me, number 3 is service, which is to contribute to the well-being of others who need help and to help improve society. Now, I'm telling you this just because when I think about purpose in life and where to start, I can absolutely tell you that 5 years ago, those 3 would have been very, very different. And in fact, top number 1 5 years ago for me probably would have been leadership. The role I was in at the time, necessitated me, or at least I felt the responsibility to dive really deeply into leadership. And so that's how it's, that's why it's really good to start now, if this is your time for thinking about your purpose. Even if you've already come, part way or some way or a long way through your career, because these values will change. And actually, I think a lot of our values may have changed because of the circumstances we found ourselves in the last year. So whereas you might think you're very clear on your 19 or however many values you may have, I would just encourage you at this stage, if you're thinking about purpose, to just go back to your value set, if you like. And this is one thing I say to my clients: you have to be honest. This isn't a wish list. This isn't what we wish we could be, or wish we had in our lives, or wish we were more of. This is going to be far more useful for you, I believe, if you can really be honest with yourself and say, okay, these are the things that I care really deeply about right now. Not last year, not possibly next year, maybe not in 5 years' time, and certainly not 20 years ago. What is it that you care really deeply about now? What is it that guides you? What is it that your values are? And just to explore that difference again between values and principles. So just to highlight this again, mine, personal growth, family, and service for my values. But my principles, and those that are timeless and don't change throughout my life, certainly. So the 3 I would say are kindness, respect, and inclusion. So they are the things that guide you in the work you do, and they tend to stay pretty constant. They may change for circumstances that perhaps you experience in your life, but they tend to stay fairly constant once you've worked out what they are. Whereas values, as I've said, can change over time. In terms of what to do with this, I'm saying this is where to start. I would encourage you to talk to people. I think it's easy to think we know what our values are in our own minds. And neuroscience will tell us that our brains are actually really lazy. Our brains take shortcuts all the time. We will always go to something that is familiar. We will always go to something that we've thought about before. And so if we're doing this exercise on our own, it can be a challenge to make sure that you're getting really fresh perspective and really clear about what's current for you now, because it might be that your brain is almost tricking you and shortcutting you to something that was work you did a year ago or 2 years ago. So if this is something that you're interested in and you want to start, talk to a friend, talk to a trusted colleague, talk to a family member if that makes sense for you, or talk to someone completely independent, because the perspective they will give you, even if they don't say much, even if they're just there to listen and to be with you whilst you think this through, will allow your brain to just go that little bit further, to just dive a little bit deeper into what really matters for you now. And brains are wonderful when we ask questions of them. So asking yourself those 4 questions that I mentioned earlier might just start you on that journey of, okay, where do I start from? Who am I when I start this journey? Who is me? What is my authentic self? What are my values? What are my principles? And to get a good grounding in that, it is, I believe, a really great start, and you can take it on from there. So step 1 done, sounds easy. Step 2, I'm going to call that the breaking it down. So you may well have worked out what your values are. It may have been a very simple task for you, or it may have been somewhat challenging. There may have been conflicting thoughts in your mind. It may have sort of waxed and waned between, number 1 and number 3, or number 5 and number 10, or whatever it might happen. But once you've got something of a clear picture, and as I say, it will move. So don't worry about getting it absolutely spot on now, because things will change. But once you've got a grounding or a foundation, where do you go from there? So I ask another series of questions. I'm a big fan of questions, particularly because I think they open up something in our minds that we just don't necessarily have if we don't ask ourselves open questions. So take your values, and then I ask another set of questions, which are these 3. What is in my control? So number 1, what is in my control or influence? Number 2, what's outside my control or influence? And number 3, what possibilities are available to me now, and how much effort or input do I need to achieve these? So in or out of your control, and what are those possibilities? And I've sort of encapsulated that on the slide of what's going on in my life right now, what's working well and what's not. And I think the point about control and influence is so important. I have observed both in myself and with those around me that we can get caught up in spending time and effort, little or no control over the outcomes. And what that can lead to is just frustration. Because if we are trying to change something and yet we're not in the place or the position, or we don't have the agency or whatever it might be to change something, then our efforts are going to frustrate us. So what I like to look at is, let's spend lots of effort and lots of time in what is in your control or in your influence. So there may well be things that you don't directly control, or you don't directly have a seat at the table, but you have an opportunity to influence that. You have an opportunity to talk to people about your thoughts or your views or your challenges or your concerns. And they may not be able to get to the heart of the decision that is being made, but you have some influence. So influence or control, let's put lots of effort in there, and stay away as much as you can. Stay away from those things that really aren't in your control. And then the third point about what possibilities. This is where I always say, be really realistic here. Is it possible that in 10 years' time, I'll be in a Broadway play? Probably not. Definitely not, probably. And yet, is it possible that in 10 years' time, I might have written a book? I don't know. It's possible, because that's in my control. I can control whether or not I put in the effort to sit down and think of a title and think of concepts and pitch it and write a book. So be realistic here, and keep diving deeper and deeper into what you think are the possibilities, because the more you look at those and the more you hone them, the more you refine them, and the more you're honest with yourself about what you'll actually put effort into and what you will probably lose heart with quite quickly, can give you a really honest appraisal of where you might want to be spending more of your time in order to reach that part of you that is your purpose, or indeed the purpose for you right now, which might be one chapter, and that may end at the end of this year, it may end tomorrow, or it may go on for another couple of years or for another 5 years. So let's just hone those possibilities, what is really available for you into as neat and as sharp as you can possibly make it. Again, do that with a friend, do that with a colleague, do that with an independent person, because the more you hone it, the clearer it will be. And I just want to pause at this point and just offer, I suppose, a sort of an imaginary case study, if you will, just to bring these two into hopefully some focus before I move on to the third step in the process. So imagine a person who, and I'm going to use a lawyer as an example, not to exclude, and I appreciate there may well be lots of different professions on the call, but just as an example that comes to mind in terms of a recent experience of mine. So I'm going to ask you to imagine a person who is in the fortunate position of being in a well-paid, well-respected job. You know, he or she is, say, 15, 20 years into their career, and they have an opportunity to move into a promoted place or indeed another job. And they are really stuck. The thinking has just stopped for them. They've done their pros and cons list. They've talked to friends. They've talked to peers. They've really racked their brains. They've woken up at night and tried to play it out in their mind. And they just can't get to the decision. They make one decision one day and then they feel that that's the wrong decision and they make another one the next day. So what's going on there? Let's imagine that person has done all of that work to try and sort of sort out what the pros and cons are. Yes, it would be more financially beneficial to me, maybe longer hours, maybe more travel. So they've done all of that sort of realistic honing of their decision-making process. The question I would ask is, right, what are the values? What is really, really important for you right now? Not last year, not next year, not in 5 years' time, but right now. And I'm going to ask you to imagine that person, when he or she is taken through the values list, identifies his top three or her top three as family, number one. So again, let's imagine that person has caring responsibilities or family responsibilities. And for him or her right now, what's top of their values list, what they really care deeply about is family. And when they recognize that, it is then much more straightforward to evaluate the two opportunities, because their purpose at that point is to do the right thing or the appropriate thing that fits in with the values they hold dear at this moment in their lives. So they may well then reevaluate the two jobs or the two positions and say, okay, one of them is going to allow me to spend more time with my family or be home earlier or not travel as much, or whatever makes sense for them. It may well have lower financial benefits or other areas that aren't 100% perfect for them, but their top value being family, it fits into that. And that's how these kind of questions about, that may not have been his purpose. His purpose might not have been, or her purpose might not have been to stay in the job that they're in right now. But when they look at their life as, as a whole and what they really deeply value, family is important. Therefore, the decision they are making right now feeds into that value and gives that value the best chance of flourishing. If you fast forward and ask that person in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, what their decision might be at that stage in their career, it may well be the different one. And that's a point that I just wanted to really sort of emphasize, that, and going back to the short stories point, purpose doesn't have to be one very far-sighted goal. It can be what makes sense for you now, what you really want to achieve right now. And that may well change in 5 years' time when circumstances change, or in a year's time, or in 6 months' time. And I think it's really important to accept that and to acknowledge that, because if we aren't one of those people, the sort of Olympic athlete, or very clear about what we want to do, then actually getting these little wins and finding out what it is that makes sense for us right now in the moment, what will work well for us, that feeds into our realistic values, can just make it a little bit more straightforward to work out what it is we need to do today or tomorrow. I hope that makes a little bit of sense for everyone. So moving on to the third point. So this is the bit that I like to call get granular. And you may think that doing values and looking at your life and examining it and trying to work out what really drives you, what makes you happy, what makes you unhappy, what gives you energy, what doesn't give you energy, is the getting granular. But I'd like to take it just that further step if you really want to get clear about how to bring this all together into your daily lives. So getting granular for me is what you do right now to feed into the purpose or the values that you've identified for yourself. So again, a sort of a case study, if you like, or an imaginary situation. If one of your values, and let's take one of the others from the 19 list, let's take well, let's say wealth. So let's say wealth is one of your strong values. It's in your top 3 or your top 5 at the moment. So to earn a great deal of money, or let's say that it's prestige, to be recognized by others as being successful, to be well known in my chosen field. So let's say those 2 are in your top 3 at the moment. I think for some people that may feel like it doesn't come into their day-to-day existence. So it doesn't carry with them into the next meeting they're doing or the conversation they're having, because it is something they are working towards. It's a big goal. It's a big challenge for them in their lives to become successful, to become prestigious, to become wealthy. And I suppose I would question that, and I would bring this perspective, which is, how do any of us ever get to achieve the values or the purpose that we've defined for ourselves if we don't start doing the small steps that takes us on that journey now? So if we want to be known for a particular career or a particular expertise or a particular, let's focus on what we do today and tomorrow. So if I'm going into a meeting and one of my principles is respect and inclusion and kindness, and one of my values is to support people, I would ask the question, what can I do in this meeting, in this conversation, in this random meeting with some stranger on the street? If I'm guided by those principles and values, and I know where I want to be, how can I make that small step in this conversation that I'm having now, or in this meeting that I'm having now? And I think that takes a lot of effort, and I'll be completely frank with everybody about that. I think if you're getting to that level of granularity, it can take an awful lot of thinking time, but it becomes easier over time. It's a habit. And I don't know if many of you have read, or any of you have read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's something that has sort of captured my attention recently as an interesting guiding light in terms of how taking on the small tasks and doing them differently right now lead to those incremental and compound gains that you're heading for in the 2 years time, or the 5 years time, or the 10 years time, or throughout your life. So to ask yourself, what is my mindset as I go into this meeting with my line manager, this meeting with the partner on my team, this meeting, if I am the partner in the team, with my newly qualified solicitors or my trainees? What is my mindset going into this? Is it just another meeting? Is it just one of those team meetings I need to have today to get to where else I need to get? Or is it, can I make a difference here? Can I focus on, with the values that I have in mind and with the principles that I have in my mind, can I do something that supports both my purpose and my values, but also the values or the purpose of one or more of the people in that meeting with me? And in order to do that, not only do we need to understand what our own values and our own purpose is, but we might need to ask the question of the other people. And as I say that, I can absolutely appreciate that if you've a team of 25 or 50 or even 4 or 5, trying to understand what motivates others and what their values are and what their principles are could end up taking an awful lot of your time if you are the leader or the partner or the head of that team. And so I do appreciate that in reality, trying to do that for every single person, every single step of the way in your day is going to get absolutely exhausting and probably unachievable. But I suppose what I would ask is, how many times in your day can you do it? So is there someone you work very closely with, which actually you could support them? It would feed into one of your values. And if you understand their values and their purpose and their principles, how do you work together with that person? How can you meet that person if they have completely different values to you? How do you listen to them? How do you get on the same level as them, or at least be in that space of empathy with them, excuse me, in order that you're supporting not only your own values and principles and fulfilling your purpose, but also supporting the other people in your team or in your life, or those around you that you meet throughout the various stages of your career. Excuse me. So that level of granularity, and it's probably a good thing that I can't see your faces, because if I'm sort of talking and people are thinking, gosh, I don't think I could do that every day of my life, I'd be run off my feet. Absolutely. I completely get that. And this is an area that, if you can get granular for yourself, if you know what you are bringing into this meeting for yourself to achieve what you want to achieve, then that's a fantastic place to be. It is aspirational, I suppose, to get to a place where not only are you doing that for yourself, but you're also trying to support the others on your team. And indeed, some of you may well have got there already. And I know through COVID, a lot of organizations and teams and team leaders have supported some absolutely, awe-inspiring habits and constructs that allow people to really talk and to listen to each other and to understand what makes people tick, in order to support them in what has been, a really unusual year for all of us. So I take my hats off to all of those organizations, and hopefully a number of you on the call will be part of those kind of organizations that has really supported these ideas of empathy and getting to know what makes other people tick, so that you can support them through not just this stage of their career, but that will carry with them throughout their career and whatever they end up doing with their lives. So it's, it can be incredibly fulfilling, but I do appreciate that in reality there's an awful lot of work to get on with, so that may not be something that you can focus on all of the time. I'm simply asking or encouraging, I suppose, to think about it and to see whether it's something you can do at some stages or in certain projects or certain teams. So that's something I think is aspirational, but no doubt some of you are already doing it. So just conscious of time, it's 1:45. So let's just do a little bit of a wrap up in terms of, you've taken yourself through, or you've thought about the 3 steps. So where to start, asking yourself those questions about what you value. You've broken it down even further. You've worked out what's in your control and what's not in your control and what the possibilities are. And then you've really explored your day-to-day existence and how you can bring your mindset into the next meeting, the next conversation, in order to support your values and to support your purpose. So how else might you go about your daily lives in order just to sort of bring this into as much of into as many areas of your life as you can? So just a few thoughts, and I'd be very, very keen to hear other people's thoughts, because these are just some of the things that make sense for me at the moment. So making it intentional and making it deliberate. I've seen, and again, a lot of you on this call may well have experienced this as well. I've observed a lot of people asking the questions at the moment as we think about going back into the office. How are we going to ensure inclusivity? How are we going to ensure that everyone is supported if some are working at home and some are working in the office on some of the days, or for some of the projects, or all of the different complexities that no doubt a lot of you are thinking about at the moment? And I think there's an interesting parallel between that and how we think about our own working lives and our own careers and our own thoughts about purpose. Making it intentional. So really thinking about why we're doing something. What is the purpose of me doing this? Or what is the purpose of me not doing something? So I'm really intentional before everything I do. I say I mean, I try, but I don't get there half the time, let alone 80 or 90% of the time. But I try to think about what it is that I'm doing. What is my intention here? How does it support me? How does it support others? How does it support my values? And I'm then deliberate about the steps I take, or the actions I can influence, or the decisions I can move forward with, because I've connected the dots, I suppose, as much as I can. And I think a lot of people are in that space at the moment, reflecting on how they can make it intentional and deliberate to support everyone. And, are we going to have all of our meetings in one place with everybody on screen, or are we going to do it in person? And all of these many, many things, which I know a lot of you are no doubt thinking about, and perhaps some of them are keeping you awake at night. So the idea of being intentional, being deliberate about it, just brings you back into that sort of reality of, right, what is it that I am doing, and why am I doing it, and does it support the things that I want to do, and does it support the others that I'm either leading or in a team with? I mentioned earlier that the concept of habits and how they're formed, and James Clear's book on atomic habits, some of you may well have read it, as I say, just seems to resonate with a lot of what we're doing at the moment about how we think about life. And, those habits that we find come really easily to us and come really naturally are probably the ones that give us some insight into what we're doing and why we're doing it. So what our purpose is in doing those things. And because there will be some people who will find something that I really struggle with every day, they find it really easy. And that gives us a lot of data about what it is that's motivating or energizing or giving value or giving purpose to that person versus what it's doing for me. And the more we recognize, and the more we're aware of those little things throughout our day, and the habits we perform that we find really simple, and the ones that we really struggle to keep on top of, probably give us a lot more data than we might think at first glance. So as you go through your day, and as you're exploring and reflecting, if you take time to do that, I don't know, in a journal or just in a conversation with a friend, it's useful, I think, to just notice those habits at the very least. And if you end up writing them down and sort of tracking them, then that can be useful data as well about what's driving you, what's motivating you, and how that fits into the sort of the bigger picture or the bigger perspective. This is one that I think I was on a webinar recently about, and some of you may have been on this webinar too, about perfectionism and lawyers. And actually the next two are probably linked, so I'll put that one up as well. I think there's a temptation, and I speak as a lawyer here, to feel as if we need to do everything absolutely 100% perfectly, or we just don't do it at all. And we have a tendency, and I will use the first person, I certainly throughout my career had a tendency to be a very harsh critic and to very harshly judge myself, not others, myself, if I felt I hadn't done something with absolute perfection. And what I think has happened, or what I've reflected has happened with my career, is that I've started to focus on being curious. Okay, why didn't that go so well? What is it? Was my mindset out of, kilter? Had I not had a good sleep the night before? Had I not taken an exercise, or had enough water, or eaten healthily, or whatever it might be? Or had I sort of had an argument with my husband, or whatever it might be? And rather than berating ourselves for the fact that we didn't we didn't achieve what it was we had set out to achieve, just to be curious about why. Because the more we notice without judgment what it was that the context was, the more we can then build success and build achievement into the future, because we know what works, we know what's working well for us now, and we know what's not working well for us. So we build that into our day. And the key word there is, curiosity, not judgment, because, or the key phrase, I should say, because if we do it with judgment, our brain just shuts down, and we don't want to go any further. And the webinar that I was on recently, as I say, was about perfectionism in the legal profession, and I'm sure everybody has lots of different views about that. But aiming for perfection is, nobody's going to win in that game, because it doesn't exist. You don't get there. And if you're going to berate yourself for not getting there, you'll never do anything. You won't start your journey to work out what your values are, what your purpose is, how you can make things better for yourself, or more focused for yourself. So be curious, stay out of judgment as much as we can, and try to get to something that you're comfortable with, or that's good enough. I know that phrase doesn't necessarily sit well with people, but good enough, because if we're trying for perfection, I find that difficult to say now. If we are aiming for perfection, it's going to be a real challenge to get there. And then probably I suppose, just to wrap up, my favorite one is the practicing and exploring and experimenting. And I read a case study recently about a photography class in an American university, and it was part of a filmography course or a filmmaking course. And the very innovative professor decided to cut the class in half, and basically say, right, one half you're doing one thing, and the other half of the class you're doing something else. And it was a photography class. And he said, right, group over here, I want you to take as many photos as you can, and you work in the whole group. So however many of you, 10 of you in that group, take as many photos as you can. And if you bring me back 100 photos, you're going to get an A. If you bring me back 80, you're going to get a B. And if you bring me back only 60, you're going to get a C, and so on. So they were really clear about what they had to do. They had to go and take as many photos as possible. And the second group, the professor told them, you need to just submit one photograph as a team, just one photograph, but it has to be absolutely spot on in terms of composition, in terms of lighting, in terms of subject matter. You have to have really, really thought it through. And what he found was the group who were able to just go and take as many photos as they can were far more innovative and actually had the better photos, because they practiced, they explored, they were questioning, they were curious, they experimented, they discovered more, because they didn't have that burden of, oh, I need to do this absolutely spot on, and that's how I get my A grade. And the photographs in that group were far clearer, far more context specific, far better composition than the one that the team had started on, because that team spent so much time planning, spent so much time in that sort of, thinking phase, that the photograph they took actually didn't necessarily make it to the level that they expected it to be. And I think the same is with, can be brought into our lives. I think it's really challenging for all of us sometimes to experiment and to explore, because we no doubt fear the judgment of others, or we fear we may fail, or we fear we may, do something that we look back on and we go, why was I doing that? And I recognize that, absolutely. But the more we practice, the more we experiment, the more we explore, the more we'll learn, and the more we will get clearer and clearer and clearer on what works for us now and what doesn't, and how we want to move forward and how we don't, and how we might change something to get to the next phase of our short story, or to the next short story. And, I think if you think about organizations, if you're a tech company, of course, you're not going to change and bring out, a completely new product overnight. You're going to do lots of testing. You're going to do focus groups. You're going to do, taking it out into a small market, refining it, honing it, getting feedback, all of that. So I like to call those the sort of safe to fail experiments. Go out there and experiment. where it's safe to fail. So if it all goes wrong, nothing bad will happen. It's just a small experiment. Maybe it's that you talk to a friend about something. Maybe it's that you talk to your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, friend about it. And that, and you know, the consequences of getting it, quote unquote, wrong are not huge. So it's about those small practices we can do, the small experimentations, the things that we don't mind fearing failure of, that we can do to just hone and be really clear about what it is that we want out of life and what it is that we can do right now to focus that and to take really, really small steps every day to get closer to whatever it is for this period of our lives, knowing that there may well be lots of other periods of our lives. And how exciting that we can have those focuses for now and then see where we might get to in the future. Thank you for listening to that whistle stop tour of purpose, and yeah, very, very happy to ask any questions if there are any. I don't know, I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there are any, but I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, none through the chat so far, but if there's still time, if anybody wants to put one in, or you can come off mute and ask it in person, or put up your hand, or put up your virtual hand, or whatever you like. But thanks for staying with this. I certainly thought it was really made a topic that could be quite lofty and hard to grasp. You know, it made it practical, and the steps you can take now. You don't have to wait for someone else to give you purpose, or wait for, you know, this long-term goal. You can find it in what you're doing right now. So that was great. Lots of nice comments coming through the chat there. So if there's no questions, I know we had said that there'd be a prize or a little draw. So Katie, do you want to say what that is? I in advance, and Katie will attest to this, that we said it was going to be number 31 on the participants list before we even knew who was coming today. So we'll stick to that and let number 31 know. But Katie, what were you offering?
I'm laughing now, Maeve, because you bigged it up so much. It's going to sound like a real letdown. So what I had said to Maeve beforehand was that I would be, you know, more than happy to offer one person, and I think it's number 31, as you said, Maeve, a purpose coaching session with me for an hour when at a time that suits. So again, apologies if anyone was hoping for an iPad or something interesting, but I'd be very, very happy to yeah, whoever number 31 is.
Well, I think, yeah, this is the first time we've ever offered anything on an IWLA call. So yeah, we couldn't if we're going from nothing to iPad would probably be a massive jump. And as someone who's done some career coaching myself, I can say that would be a really worthwhile session. You know, it's great to have somebody to bounce things off and to question you and help you kind of hone your mind and on all the things that are floating through it. So I'd encourage number 31, when we figure out who you are, to definitely avail of that, and we can put you in touch with Katie to organise that. So yeah, people are saying there's lots of thinking to do. I think everyone's going to go away now and really try to answer those questions for themselves that you posed. But yeah, we don't seem to have any questions at the moment. So thanks everybody for joining.
I think, sorry, Maeve, I was just scrolling through the chats there as well. Just wondering what happens when your short-term or current values could hamper your long-term goals as your values change. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think what I would say is to try and look at it from the perspective of those short stories, and then come back to the question, what is important for you right now? So if in the short term, something that really matters to you means that you're slightly off path for the thing that is your long-term goal, and I'm not going to give advice in that sense, but my sort of sense is that what's right for you right now is probably where you want to go, because you can always get back on track with your long-term goals because the short stories keep coming. So you can do what's right now, what absolutely suits you in terms of your values right now, and then get back on to what it is that you were hoping was your long-term goal, or that you'd set for yourself as your long-term goal at a later stage in your life when things have changed. So yeah, but good, yeah, very good question.
Speaking on mute. No, I just think everything's been really kind of positive, and there is something you can do, and that's a thing of not waiting, and if it's not aligning right now, that doesn't mean it's not that's the future. So on that note, thanks for your question, and thanks very much, Katie, for joining us and giving us that insight. And you can see in the chat there, it's been really appreciated. So we'll keep in touch and see you in the virtual world, and hopefully in person. But thanks everybody, and have a lovely evening.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate you sticking with me. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.